Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Science of Superpowers. I am Tonya Dawn Recla, and I have with me today Amber Needham. Amber, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone.
Fabulous. Well, I am really, really excited about today's conversation. We're tackling this concept of believing is seeing. And the element of this, right? This is our teaching principle today that we're looking into. And I love that Amber's here with us because she is the author of The Blind Girl Sees, Seeing Through the Heart and Not the Eyes. And it's such a brilliant story. I'm so excited to share a little bit of her journey with you. And as we're going through this, I want you really focusing in on this concept of believing is seeing, right? A lot of us don't realize how much we sort of structure our existence based on sight being the prevalent ability, right? And so we kind of come at it from the seeing is believing perspective. And a quick story, those of you who've been listening to the show know that Justin and I met teaching at the Counter Intel Special Agent course. And one of the concepts that we taught was around really in-depth communication, right? It sort of planted the seeds for our energetic communication curriculum that we teach here. And one of those concepts that was most challenging was this idea that what we see isn't necessarily all that's there. Sometimes it's not even quote unquote there, right? It's like we kind of make it up. And so it's like, what? Do you want to really get into a hot mess as you start telling a bunch of law enforcement intel folks that there's no hard truths, right? And so it's challenging to wrap our minds around this. But I think what we're going to see through Amber's story is that it's important to start as we continue our own personal evolutions that we do sort of question these things and say, hey, how am I looking at the world, and how much of what I think I know is predicated on outdated belief structures that I may not even agree with anymore, right? And so this gives us a chance to better understand ourselves, better understand our systems, and perhaps better understand each other excuse me, and meet each other in a little bit of grace and offering a little bit of space as we realize that we're not all having the same experiences. And so I love so much about this experience today, and I'm glad that you're joining us. And I welcome you here. Amber, we're going to jump in here. And first of all, thank you so much for joining us. What a delight to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very, very fascinated with your journey and your willingness to share this journey with others. And so I appreciate you in that capacity. Our first question is, what are your superpowers and how are you using those for good?
Well, geez, I think I've got quite a few superpowers. The one is that I feel my way through a problem,
Mhm.
a setback, a situation. I feel my way through it. And regardless that fear is present, very likely present, my superpower is that I now will plow through it
Mm.
regardless. Um,
Beautiful.
yeah. Um, I think my other superpower is I get jazzed up when I can be of service, when I can do something that makes me feel good, but I know that
Mhm.
there's a better purpose, a purpose that will serve
Mhm.
others, community wise, global wise, um, you know, with the vision, with my ophthalmologist team,
Mhm.
just on a bigger scale to be of service in some way that serves others.
Beautiful, beautiful. And our body of work would support the fact that those two are really interconnected, right? Our ability to sense our way, right? Which is it, I'm playing with notions that this is an evolution of sorts, right? Our sensitization seems to be arriving out of an awakening awareness sort of evolution for all of us. And as we become more energetically sensitized to ourselves, to the world around us, and to others, there's sort of this undeniable connection that we feel. And so it makes sense to me that right in there in that same conversation would be the awareness that when we contribute to others, right, in a way, there is this attraction principle, there's this receptivity that the field offers us in our interconnections with each other. And so I love the fact that you brought those two forward. I'm sure you have many superpowers, but those two interconnected, I think, actually really shape up nicely the heart and soul of our conversation today, because that is what we're talking about, right? It's the seeing beyond seeing, right? It's the knowing beyond knowing, seeing through knowing as opposed to knowing through seeing, right? And really holding on to this awareness that there's so much going on in our inner landscape that is informed by the programs that we have, the experiences that we've had, and that really dictates our interactions with the world. Share a little bit with the audience, Amber, if you don't mind. You had an experience that was abrupt, right? And so your experience with vision and with the sensory kind of capabilities that we have, the extrasensory capabilities we may possess, any sensitivities, any abilities that we haven't even yet tapped into, came upon you abruptly. And so would you care to share a little bit about, because I like the fact that there's this huge juxtaposition. There's like the before and then the after, and your life sort of allowed for, if I dare speak into it at all, some this really like this comparison place of certainly I'm sure it wasn't easy in the transition. But where you sit now, I can feel the power that you hold, right? The comfortability, the confidence that you carry. And I wonder how much of that wasn't part of this journey as well. Do you care to share some about what you experienced?
Certainly. In 2015, I was, living life as full as I thought I was. I was an entrepreneur. I had a couple of businesses. And within 30 days, my vision, my very, very, very good vision, went downhill to 30 days not being able to see 6 inches from my
Mm,
face and count fingers. Initially, they didn't know what had happened. We did eventually figure it out, and that was yet another miracle that kind of just dropped in as to the breadcrumb that led us to why. And it was something that shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened. It was a recall on a product that I was putting in my eyes for lubrication, which I had done every night, and it had gone through transportation. It had gone through freezing, and it crystallized, and I was putting
mm,
that in my eye, scratching my cornea. Fast forward a couple of years, my ophthalmologist offered the last opportunity to get my sight back, and that was limbal stem cell surgery.
mm,
It was not promised that it would work, but at this point, it was my last opportunity. Well, it worked. It worked.
mm, mm,
In gradually, over several months and reaching well over into a year, my sight began to recover, and
mm,
I went right back to where I was with sight. But in the meantime, because of the experience and how fearful I was, I had to learn to navigate differently.
mhm,
When you don't have your sight, you just have to, if you want to play the game of life, you have to learn how to navigate. So when I got my sight back, I thought it was like a gift, obviously.
mm,
But it wasn't meant to last. The stem cells stayed alive, but then another ridiculous, shouldn't have happened incident happened. Just as freaky, just as bizarre. And it wiped me back to zero.
mm,
Believe it or not, the stem cells are still alive, but being a whole new situation, the stem cells help keep the cornea healthy, but obviously the other destroyed another part of the eye.
mm.
But it was at this point that I started to really go deep and realize that I didn't need my sight. I was seeing better without it, because my perceptions of the world, my perceptions of myself, um,
Mhm,
were obscured. And without my sight and leading through my heart, I could navigate better.
Mhm.
And then that's when I became to the notion that it was supposed to happen. And
Mm.
that's why I can accept my my blindness. I can accept it. I can embrace it actually, and even take it so far as celebrate it, which I have done.
Amber, I love so much about your story. So, and thank you for sharing it. It's um there's so much in this. The layers are so rich, and your willingness to experience the experience of it, right? And walk through it and know yourself even more on the other side of it. All of that are little micro choices we make along the way, right? Of how to interact with whatever it is that comes in front of our path, and the grace with which you're willing to adopt those things and to experience new things. And it's interesting because I don't know that we speak a lot in certain cultures about the real benefit and the power of that perseverance, right? Of moving through things and knowing that, like you mentioned, the game of life, right? We're playing it, and there's all kinds of twists and turns and ups and downs, but the perspective that we hold, right? What we believe it's showing us, right? The versatility that you now possess. The I watched what happened during the pandemic, and I think those of us who've endured certain sort of trauma, certain experiences, certain resiliency tests in our lifetime, and choose to evolve through them, um, though we're really positioned in a different way during the pandemic than others. And it was interesting to, and even following that, right, with what we're dealing with now as a nation and as a globe. Um, and so it does kind of put my mind into this question of, um, how can we maybe encourage people to be a little bit more courageous in exploring things outside of their comfort zone. I mean, this situation was thrust upon you, and at some point you chose to embrace it. And you could be angry. Like, it sounds to me like there's a couple situations you could be pretty angry about. But as you find, particularly when you open up to those sensitive levels, that anger is its own weapon against yourself, right? And so it's like when you understand the nuances of how the field works, it's like you could dive into those things, but you do understand the cost. And I think that the willingness to explore what the world looks like when we're not totally dependent on these kind of um, the primary sensory or the physical reality or the visioning, the hearing as we would typically know them, it starts to shift your awareness of yourself. I love that you said that it changed how you knew yourself, right? And you realized that with vision, you had a little bit of a warped sense of self. Can you
Mhm.
speak a little bit into that? I think body image and how we know ourselves to be is so huge. What did you discover when you lost sight of yourself, essentially, or gained sight of yourself, right? How did that go for you?
Well, first of all, I was in the beauty industry for 23 years.
My
So
goodness, yeah.
my primary business was looking after women from a physical point of view, from attractive point of view. And so that was ingrained in me.
Mhm,
And when the sight is missing, or any any of our senses, others kick in. That's just what I've come to discover with myself. The minute my sight was absolutely gone, it was just nothing but pure fog. Um, all of a sudden, my body just started to, it opened up my ability to feel more. And I was instantly aware of it, and I just kind of ran with it because that was my way of communicating.
mhm,
So in the beginning, in the beginning, very frustrating things were happening. And yeah, you know what? I was angry and I was miffed and the whole bit. But I knew that I couldn't stay there.
mhm,
That was just, I was bigger than that. I was better than that
mhm,
to stay there. So I would, be as optimistic as I could. And I would tease people by saying, well, look, I can't see you. So can I feel you?
Mm.
You know, they would, you know, say, well, what do you mean? And I would just say, well, I've got, these are my eyes now. These are my
Mhm.
eyes, you know, so they would giggle and, but they would, um, warm up to me and feel
Mhm.
more comfortable with me, knowing that I wasn't, super sensitive
Right.
about not having my sight. And yeah, so the physical world, what we see isn't necessarily what truly is. Like what I would say I saw while I had good vision, I now would say um, something very different,
Mhm.
you know,
Well,
just
and
because it's here.
it's interesting. It's like almost too what I feel when you speak that way, there's almost this transmission of a sincere desire to know somebody rather than just to see them. And I there's a depth in that. And so for sure your ability to sort of manage your own circumstances is allows people to relax in your presence. But it feels like there's also this real invitation. I think when you know yourself in a whole way, right? When you go into those depths of yourself, um, there's a drawing in that others feel because we seek that, right? We want to know ourselves at that level. And so I think there's a real beautiful exchange that's happening energetically there too. And I'm glad that you brought that up because you mentioned the word feeling. And I was going to ask if it was more tactile, you know, if the increase in your sensitization was more tactile or more in the sensing, or both. You know, when you talk about feeling, how are you perceiving that?
It's actually very both. This
Hmm.
keeps me in the physical by
Hmm.
being able to know where I am, you know, by feeling things, knowing where I am. I'm sitting at my desk. I feel this and I feel that. The feeling through my heart is the energy that's
Hmm.
coming off of other people. I can now enter a room and not see a single soul there, but I can
Mm.
feel, which I mean is available to every single one of us. It's available, but
Right.
without the visual acuity, it
Hmm.
just it gets bigger.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it could have been in the beginning because it was a survival um, thing that happened that I could do
Hmm.
that. Maybe I was always able to do it, and again, because the visual was far more important to me back then,
Hmm.
it wasn't as strong of a skill.
Hmm.
And now it's just super easy. It's natural, actually. It's natural.
Yeah.
It's not even a skill.
Yeah, I contend that it is available to all of us and that it is present, but our programs are weighted more heavily in sightedness. And
Yes.
so we don't necessarily have more evolved or more advanced programs for dealing with um, other stimulus that comes in ways that we're not adept at. And I think in the overall sense of things, there's so much data that comes at us through the field at all times that, you know, we can only process what we have the programs for. And here you were thrust into a situation where you didn't have a program for it, and so you had to discover. And so you were discovering it not as an infant coming into the world without sight, but instead with experience and wisdom and all, you know, decades of knowing yourself in a particular way and knowing the world in a particular way, and then getting that juxtaposition right now you're able to kind of compare and contrast, and then to have it come back and go back. I mean, just like that, that's it's a fabulous story for what's possible when we're presented with choices and how we choose to be within it no matter what's happening. As you were talking about, you know, seeing with your hands and being able to feel your way through things, I was curious if you're not touching things, right, if that's not, you're not connecting in with the world through that, is the sense something like almost drifting through the world, you know, in a sense like moving in and out of worlds. um is that similar, or how would you describe it? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you're not touching in physically, what's the internal experience like? How would you explain that?
It's different all the time, actually. If I walk again into a room, can I sense inanimate objects as to where am I?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just my energies um, molding and engaging and becoming one with other energies?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's more what I experience. If I walk into a room and I don't feel the energy of another person, then I will, my senses of smell and other things will kick in, like where am I?
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing. Um, yeah, it when I first became blind, it was very, very difficult because it is even amazing with a sense of touch. I can remember uh, being in a moment where I felt so isolated because I thought I have a cell phone that's laying beside me, but because it's a flat screen, I can't make a call.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my microwave, I want to heat up a cup of coffee, for crying out loud. I can't touch the buttons because I never memorized where the buttons were
Mm-hmm.
as to where's the quick heat and that sort of thing. Um, Doing laundry and thinking, oh, how am I going to match socks? How am I going to manage to do this without help,
Mm-hmm.
of course? Um, so it was, okay, I've got to come up with a method. So I just started pinning my socks together when I took them off. They went through the wash, pinned, came out, pinned, and I never had to sort them. I mean, I had to find ways. So
Mm-hmm.
that was through touch
Mm-hmm.
without sight. Um, but then it just grew from there as to, I think, the tenacity of
Mm-hmm.
just survival.
I love this because it's something that we work with in our body, work with clients in terms of helping optimize our systems, right? And so what you're speaking to is if the more systems you put in place that sort of address your basic needs, right? The things that you would spend your time thinking about throughout the day, like how do you work a microwave, right? And the more you can streamline that, sight gives us the ability to do that. We've built a world where it matches up with sight, and so the expedited way is typically the sighted way, but that's not the only way to do things expeditiously. And so you're speaking to finding your own way to program yourself so that the basic kind of needs can be met, so you could then go on to living at some evolved level that you were used to, right? Being able to create, being able to sit and contemplate, right? Being able to interact and socialize, entertain, or be entertained, whatever it is. The luxury of doing that requires that our survival is met, and we all have programs that kind of help with that. A lot of us, especially into adulthood, are pretty well set in our programs, right? And then to have that kind of disruption, it's almost like you got to reverse engineer how we build those programs to begin with. And so, folks, this is the nugget. I was curious what our nugget was going to be today to take away with, but in this conversation of believing is seeing, you have a choice to hone these extrasensory perceptors, like Amber's speaking of, these natural, I think of as natural, but perhaps supernatural abilities that we have. You can do that even maintaining all of your faculties, right? And the way to do that is to take kind of a lesson from Amber's book and say, okay, what are the things that like if you do it more than once, do you have a systemized, efficient process that works for you, kind of thing? And then I love the pinning of the socks. Like it sounds silly, but if you really broke that down across 40, 50 years of life, how long do you spend sorting socks, right? And
Yeah.
it sounds like, okay, Tonya, just live your life, right? What are you doing? But I am a social scientist, and so one of the things that is fascinating is that when we program ourselves how to accomplish kind of those base level needs efficiently, like to where we never even have to think about it, it opens our consciousness up and our experience up to be very present in the moment, right? We're not having to think too hard about what we're doing. And Amber, it seems to me like you slid into this really beautiful awareness and evolution and development. You know, despite all the obstacles and stuff, I really honor you for holding it with that kind of grace. And approaching it with that gusto. And perhaps there were days when you weren't feeling very gusto, and I can appreciate that too. But you're sitting here now, and this is the path, and this is the way you've chosen to go about it. And I think there's a lot the rest of us can learn from that, and for that, I hold a lot of gratitude. So, what would you like to leave everyone with here today, in terms of how to kind of evolve your life forward, how to know yourself better, even before something forces you to? What can you offer up based on where you're sitting today?
I think I could offer through a quick story. And
Absolutely.
it basically is my old way of being was that I was a very independent woman. And I had trust issues. And once losing my sight, the sight was a gift.
Mm,
I look at my losing my sight as a gift because what it taught me was that asking for help for me was actually a way for me not to be dependent, but to remain independent in my world, of having and owning a home and having pets and, navigating through life. So trusting, I had no choice to
mm,
trust. When I was on somebody's arm and they were guiding me, there was no other way. I had to trust. I had to believe that when they said a step was coming up and I was to be descending down 6 steps, I had to trust them.
mhm.
So that's the story, and where I had pivoted from my old way of being to my new way of being. I am still independent, but in a better soul way than I was. And trusting, yeah, it's if we can't go through life um leaning on one another, helping one another in the best way that we can, then sight or no sight,
Mhm,
you're not going to get very far. And that
mhm.
it was the biggest lesson for me. So that's really what I would like to for people to take away is, we're in this game of life together, and whatever faculty we no longer have, whatever senses we no longer have, if we live with a disability or whatever, if we could be of service to each other, we're going to get further ahead and farther doing it
Mm.
together.
Brilliant. And far more delightfully, I'd imagine. Um, Wonderful, wonderful. And it's as though, like, in that exercise of learning to trust others, you're gifted also with the ability to trust yourself at deeper levels, right? I think there's a synchronicity there. Great advice, Amber. Great advice, for all of us, for all of us. And let's remember that, folks, there are some challenges facing us, like I said, as a nation, as a globe. Um, but we are incredibly creative and capable beings. And when we choose to come together in love and a sincere desire to connect, magic occurs, right? And we know this. So stand strong, folks. And what the best thing you can do is look at your own situation, right? Optimize yourself. What can you do to, look at areas maybe where you're a little bit more dependent, than you're comfortable. I have a radical extreme approach to this. I was just sharing with some friends, like, excuse me, anytime my system gets constricted around something, I run it through, like, worst possible scenarios, right? Imminent death, long suffering, torturous pain leading to death, or, I don't know, torturous enslavement. Yeah, right, right. Like, I just kind of pick the top ones, and those are kind of the top three that typically come up. And I go, okay, if this is inevitable, right? Because that's what that constriction tells us, those trauma programs. Oh my gosh, the world's gonna fall apart, right? If something is inevitable, right? It's inevitable that, Amber, in your situation, it's inevitable that this is the way things are going to be, right? What can I do now to best prepare my future self for that inevitability? And ironically, the answer is always the same, always. And it's always, first of all, take a breath, right? get good with yourself, right? Kind of calm down. Like the answer is always the same. And it has something to do with connecting into self, connecting into others, and connecting into the world around you and remembering who we are in that process. Amber, your story is inspirational. I appreciate you being willing to share it with the world through your book and through your speaking. Just know that you've got fans over here, and we honor what you're doing. And to all of you out there, we know you're facing hardships, right? Things are happening. They seem almost insurmountable, I'm sure, at times. Hold this stuff to your heart, right? You are stronger than you know. Face the fear and step through and get support. Ask for help. Great advice, Amber. Thank you for joining us today, and we wish you the best in your continued journeys.
Thank you so much, Tonya. It's been a pleasure.
Fabulous. And to all of you out there, we appreciate you listening. We love that you've been along with us for the ride. And until next time, folks, remember who you are. We love you, love each other. Oh, before I take off, for sure, go and check out Amber's site at amberneedham.com. We'll have a link for that on the episode page. Want to make sure we got that in there for our listeners. So get to Amber Needham, AmberNeedham.com. You can go check out her book there, The Blind Girl Seeing Through the Heart and Not the Eyes. Folks, we've loved having you here. Remember, believing is seeing. Go figure out how to make that work for you. We love you. Until next time, folks, love each other. Goodbye for now.